Okay, so I hope you're feeling better.
I am, thank you.
Okay, good. So just going over, I'm going to go through each standard. So we decided to use the TEACS platform standard. So new teacher going over kind of like what an administrator would come in and look at in your classroom, see what's going on. So 10 standards, professional knowledge, instructional planning, instructional strategies, differentiated instruction, assessment strategies, assessment uses, positive learning environment, academically challenging environment, professionalism, and communication. So a couple of them I didn't give feedback on just because I haven't observed it, I don't have enough information, and that's pretty normal for what they'll do for a formative assessment. The only time you'll get all 10 is in a summative. So I'll just go through kind of talk about some of them. What did you notice that I was doing and what I saw in the classroom? So the mini lesson was writing a conclusion. You broke down the info, that student writing by day, the element of an essay, and I noticed your lesson plan each week that whole week was a mini lesson every single day, breaking down those standards for writing, which is a big deal for sixth graders especially. So that was a really good use of time, and then the use of the acronym to enhance the student learning. So did you think that helped them? Do you see?
Absolutely, especially making the anchor chart with the acronym for the conclusion paragraph and keeping it around the room. Students
Did you
refer
see
back
them?
to it.
You saw them
often.
referencing
Yes,
it? Okay.
they turn back and look at it every day.
So have you found those to be beneficial in other elements of teaching, like other lessons?
The anchor charts?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're definitely a great piece of information for time, especially because students have questions about things every day that we've already gone over, and so it takes time to sit down and re-explain something to a student that you've already taught, so they can just reference the anchor charts, and they're training themselves too.
And it kind of gives them some independence too.
Yes.
So looking at your lesson plans, the instructional plan, it's evident that you are collaboratively planning with your BLC, that the instruction was directly aligned to sixth grade writing standards, and then the modeling writing of a conclusion for students was definitely helpful, I thought, and gave them multiple examples of what it could be. That could probably be part of the instructional strategies too. I mentioned the I do, we do, you do kind of tactics. So you've been using the same example all week of like what's in a thesis statement, what's in an introduction, what's in a conclusion. So kind of modeling them for your thinking. I could see a lot of students were engaged in that, and it helped them kind of understand what to do in their writing. So, and then the use of a graphic organizer. The differentiated instruction, that one I just put needs development because, like, with writing, maybe I could see that you were working with some students who were struggling. The students were using News ELA. I was unclear if the levels were adjusted.
They weren't.
So
definitely in the future I could.
Do you think that would benefit them?
Yes, and it probably wouldn't. The students who are a little lower than others, I wouldn't have to spend so much time just focusing on them. I could focus on other small groups as well. If I had lowered their Lexile levels on News LA article and put it into vocabulary that they could understand. But I didn't take the time to do that this time.
You'll know for next time, which is good. And then the graphic organizer to guide their writing. You could even consider creating and breaking it down into even smaller chunks for like even students who are really struggling with those writing skills, breaking it down into smaller chunks, or handing it to them in separate. So like only one piece of paper that has the introduction, one piece of paper that has the paragraph, one piece for the conclusion, because I know some students get really overwhelmed by it, and I know I've noticed that they have a hard time transferring over from a graphic organizer to a actual paragraph. So if you break it down, like they have a visual understanding of what it looks like. Your assessment strategies, there was an entrance ticket that day as well, so it was really quick. You could assess students on grammar, and then you were able to immediately pull them. So that's also beneficial. And then the thumbs up, side, or down for an understanding of writing inclusion. Did you find that you were able to use that to like immediately help people?
I honestly didn't even get to it.
Yeah.
We ran out of time, and typically the closing, when it's something like thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways, I don't break my back to get to it, even though I should, to assess the students' learning of that day. So in the future, that's something that I need to take into account is my
closing.
pacing, yeah, and timing during lessons. But from what I saw just walking around and working with students, they were definitely getting the conclusion.
Okay. Yeah. Assessment uses. I need more time to assess that. Positive learning environment, definitely. Your fifth period was super respectful and well managed. You were able to kind of joke around with the students. They were able to kind of play with you. You could see that you have a sense of humor in that class. They feel respected and comfortable in that class. But y'all are able to get like right back on task. And then during independent practice, some students were definitely not engaged. I think I noticed that with that last class of the day. So it's fifth period, it's the last class before connections, just kind of honing in on those students, like who is disengaged throughout the day, like repeatedly, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Who do you notice is kind of slipping through or zoning out? And then, academically challenging writing is challenging especially for sixth graders. But they were guided through the process and not handed what to write. So yes, it was a graphic organizer, so that definitely challenged them. Like I saw you talking to students, like come up with your own ideas, like don't use what I'm telling you, like and encouraging them to have a voice in their writing. So I think that's important. A lot of times I know writing can be, I'm trying to think of the word, so formulated, especially I know like when we learned that 5-paragraph essay, right? So this sentence is this sentence is this, and some students do need that, but encouraging them to have a voice in their writing, and if it doesn't sound cookie cutter, that's okay, just as long as you're, and I'm talking about that with the standard, as long as your ideas are organized, as long as you use evidence, it doesn't necessarily matter as much that you are following some strict formula for writing. And I like that you encourage the students to have a voice. The graphic organizer challenged students to high levels of like academic writing, especially that differentiating piece too. Like for students, I could have mentioned this and differentiated, like there were the topics that you allowed them to choose from. So like Jackie Robinson and Rosa Parks were obviously the easier choices for students, and
what most of them chose.
Yes, and but it was a availability for students who wanted to pick someone that was more challenging, wanted to learn about someone new. Did you find that some students did that, or did they mostly write about what they?
A few of the students who I would expect to choose names that even I hadn't heard of, Claudette Colvin and
McCrevers.
Yes, McCrevers. They chose to write about them. I have not read them yet, so I don't know if they're going to be great, but I was extremely happy and pleased to see that some students were willing to go outside of the box
and take that challenge. So just providing those opportunities to and encouraging that, and then communication. This is not what I observed in your lesson plan, but just communication outside. You have come to me before seeking advice on parent emails, and then consider doing like a quick weekly newsletter. I wrote that in there. I know that took me a couple of years to get into, but it does kind of put the accountability on the students and the parents to like, well, I email you every Friday with what's due, so taking a little bit off your back. Well, nobody can come to you and say, well, why didn't I know about this? Well, I email it every Friday. and just kind of, it sets that structure and that open communication. Like, autumn. Things I noticed that are really good. You have great relationships with your students. Your planning is directly related to standards, directly related to learning targets and ICANN statements. And you literally hit the nail on the head already. Work on that pacing. So that's so hard too. With fifth period is the period where they go and they get their book bags and it's just a short and you're
It feels
leaving.
like it's a 5-minute class period.
What? Yeah. Is that for every class, or is that the one you notice the most?
Fourth and fifth are harder, especially to get under control, because fourth period's lunch period, and then fifth period they go get their stuff out of their lockers.
So they're wanting to like pack up their book bag
and they're socializing. They have that extra time in the hallway. They have that lunch period in fourth, and so they're in their peer mode, not in their learning mode. So it's harder to get it under wraps. But even first through third, I just get so into what we're doing in work time that a lot of times it's hard to draw it in the last 5 minutes of class to do that closing, because I don't want to take away their instruction when they're that engaged.
Yeah, if they're independently working or you're working with a small group, it's really hard to do that. Have you considered setting like a timer on your phone? Like, I know I've seen some other teachers do this, so they have, it's a little obnoxious, but like you have a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth period timer, and it goes off 3 to 4 minutes before the end of class. And it doesn't have to even be a sound. It can be like a vibrate. Or I know you have an Apple Watch, it can vibrate. So then you see like, okay, we need to start wrapping up. Let's do our closing. And that also gives the students a sense of like closure and reflection too. So if there's homework, if they need to finish something, if you want to solidify something they've learned that day, setting that, like we have an opener, we have a warm up, we have the end of our class. Let's reflect and like wrap it up. And I know I'm guilty of that too. It's really hard to stop them when they are working or when you're working like with a small group. But having that piece of like reflection is just another level of like kind of accountability, especially for these sixth graders who don't have a lot of self-efficacy or accountability. So that's definitely something to consider.
Perfect.
So what did you notice about any comments? What do you notice about the standards? You can take that.
I think that the acronyms definitely help enhance the student learning, because I used one every day as I was teaching the writing, the elements of an essay, and it's so much easier too to say, okay, well, it's your introductory paragraph, where's the O and hot? And they know exactly what you're talking about, so it's definitely really good to have. And then, I don't know, with differentiated instruction, I definitely do need development, because it's so easy for me to just think everyone's on the same level because I set this expectation, and they're going to meet my expectation because I'm the teacher and they're my student, but a lot of them are struggling, so I have to
meet them where they're at to an extent.
And I'm struggling with well, I guess this goes along with pacing. If I know a student really did horribly on this entrance ticket, that means I need to go back and reteach it, but where do I have time to do that? And so it's a disadvantage to the students, because they're not being taught something that is required of them to know, because it's on our summative test, and it's just hard because I don't know how to time it and rework my lessons in order to fit in the new content that needs to be taught, and then also the old content that has already been taught that they didn't understand.
Yeah. So part of that is the benefit of ELA. So the new standard setup does come back around. So we have there's those 3 units, and then you'll come back to those standards. You'll go a little bit more in depth with them. but you'll come back to literally everything that you've already learned. So that is a benefit of that. But I think the entrance tickets are a great way to do that. But with that, and I've noticed this with my students in the past, if you give them an entrance ticket, almost immediately, if it's not that same day, the next day, pulling them, because they have that, it's still in their head, they are able to more easily reflect on what they did right and what they did wrong. Mm-hmm. And so you're able to kind of use the time as a jumping block, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think of the right word. Utilizing that time and those mistakes as an ability, as like a part of reflection. Because if you wait too long, it won't mean as much. It's not as meaningful. So just setting, like, if you know you're going to have an entrance ticket on Thursday, and this is something to bring up with your PLC, if y'all are doing an entrance ticket on Thursday over pronouns, making sure that on Friday you work in, even if it's like 10 minutes, because at the most you're going to have, what's the amount of students that you're noticing would need immediate re-instruct, intervention?
It depends
with
on
something.
Different classes. That's another trend I'm noticing. Some classes are higher than others, performance-wise, and so in my fourth period, I have as much as 10 students failing their entrance tickets at a time. So that's a class that is also shorter because of lunch. I have about 40 minutes versus the 55 I get with every other class to teach things. So I have to reflect and ask myself, am I thoroughly teaching it, or am I teaching it in a rush? So I think I do need to take the time to look back through the data and at the formatives and sit down with them and teach them, reteach them content.
I mean, so that class, if it is, because your fourth is small, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, setting aside, going back to what I was saying, if you have an entrance ticket on Thursday, know that on Friday you need to have set in either what's 10 minutes for re-instruction or intervention, maybe, or 15 as part of your day. And that can either be, with fourth, it could be a whole group re-instruction, reteaching, and then practice. And then another, it could be pulling students during the warm-up, on Friday, making sure maybe that warm-up that day is not something that the kids necessarily it's not new content, it's not an important review, it's a journal or something, and taking that 8 minutes of warm-up time to pull those kids during that time, so you're not losing instructional time, they're not losing time working or independently working or working with a partner, because I know that's something that can be a struggle too. These kids who need the intervention on a particular standard are also the kids who take twice as long to read a passage. So using that warm-up time, maybe they don't need a journal as much, but that's kind of a enrichment for the kids who don't need it, to get that free writing time while you're getting to pull the 6, 8, 10 kids who need intervention on a particular standard, and doing it quickly. So that's something to bring to your PLC, talking about, well, if we're doing an entrance ticket, we know we need to building the time that day or the next day, because you, for the most part, I feel you can look at entrance tickets there. That's the point of them. They're quick and they're easy, so you can just sort them.
The data should match up a little bit.
Yeah, so it's something that you can bring to your team, well, if this is happening to me, it's probably happening to everybody else too. So going back to the TEKS standards, are there any other, you mentioned differentiation, wanting to improve on, are there any other that you want to improve on, or anywhere you feel you are really successful?
I definitely
two questions
feel
in one.
I'm in positive learning environment, like you said. I do feel I have great relationships with the students. I struggle with sometimes, am I crossing a line and being too friendly with them to where they don't view me as their teacher anymore, they view me as a peer, because I am so young. They don't know that, but I know that, so I feel I'll psych myself out and I'll think, okay, I need to be a strict teacher, and I'll I'll catch myself with certain students who have behavior issues. Instead of positively reinforcing them, snapping at them, but it's my own insecurity, so I'm having to like work through that and figure out where the line is and how to not cross it, while also maintaining that relationship that I have worked hard to build this past 10 weeks. If that makes sense.
It does. I'm thinking. I think the positive reinforcement can come from using the PBIS system here. Is that something you've been utilizing?
Yes, I definitely need to keep it in mind more.
It's hard because it's on your computer, it's on your phone, it's not like visual there.
Yeah, it's not right there.
But do you notice that when you do mention it, you do bring it up, and you do reward students, that they react well to it?
Absolutely. Especially the other students. They hear, okay, Miss Bechtel's getting 5 pride points because she's sitting down doing her warm-up quietly.
And it's that trickle-down effect of like when one student, thank you so-and-so for following directions, thank you so-and-so for following directions, thank you. They're getting verbally praised, like maybe I need to. And it keeps you from calling out the people who aren't. Yeah. And that's a simple strategy and like a way to, like eventually it's just like kind of a mindset switch. I know I still struggle with that.
It's just not the first thing you think of.
It's not. Yeah, and it's not natural. And you want to immediately intervene in a situation. So if somebody's not following directions, you want to immediately intervene because you don't want them to be wasting time, but at the same time you don't want to distract the whole class it's being able to turn that switch on and off of like getting on to a child and being strict and being disciplined, and then being able to turn it around and, okay guys, I'm so happy to be here, let's get to work. And they're like,
makes them think you hate your job if you're so negative all the time.
Yeah, and you don't want them to think that. No, I completely get that.
And then with the differentiated instruction comes the assessment uses. I know you didn't leave any comments, but I'm not using my assessments in a way that's benefiting my students because I'm not taking the time to go back and reteach the material that I know that they need to be retaught. So I'm not using my assessments in order to intentionally plan for student success when we do get to those summative assessments, which I think with the last summative, on Unit 1 summative, my PLC as a whole, we definitely use the data from that to move forward and, intervene with students. But is it even fair to give them a summative assessment with non-restrictive elements on it when I know that they're not able to do it? Because I had the data right in front of me from a formative and they didn't do well on it, and I didn't go back and reteach it. So is it, at that point, it's a disadvantage because they don't know what they're doing, but it's also setting them up to fail. So it falls back on me.
Do you feel like that's just because do you think it's a timing thing? Do you think it's
definitely a timing thing? Because I think to myself, these formative assessments that I'm giving them, the entrance tickets, they're typically on concepts that you can teach in a mini lesson one time, 10 minutes. Most kids are going to pick up on it. But for those few that fall in the cracks, if they're struggling on small grammar concepts, they're probably struggling on author's purpose and author's point of view and
writing,
the bigger concepts that are definitely going to be 80% of our summative test. And so it's just not really, I know I need to spend more time on those concepts, than I do the non-restrictive elements, because I was struggling. We did groups yesterday in order to prepare for our summative today, and we did teacher-directed claim, reason, and evidence. And I understand that that's really important, but I was struggling because I felt guilt that I know that there are students in here that don't understand point of view or don't understand the non-restrictive elements. And these are all concepts that are going to be on our test. So next time I'm going to bring up in the PLC, you can tell me if this is a good idea or not, we typically do stations to prepare for the
Mhm.
summatives. Maybe it's going to be more work on the teachers, but maybe doing stations and the teacher directed changes every time based on the student's data. And I really have to like go in and dig
What?
and look at the grades.
Can you
But
clarify that for me?
Mhm.
What do you mean they change? Like,
So, one teacher directed will be over non-restrictive elements because there's typically 4 big concepts, so 4 stations of
Mhm.
concepts. So one teacher directed will be on non-restrictive elements, and each class I'll look at the common formative and see who bombed it.
so
and
your
take-
groups would be set up based
Mhm.
on
And then teacher directed changes to author's purpose
for who needs
for
that.
who needs that, and then
Yeah.
point of view, and then claim, reason, and evidence. Because when I was doing teacher directed yesterday, some of the kids in there, I planned out my groups to where I'd have too high, too low.
Mhm.
The lows didn't speak at all in my teacher directed, and
Yeah.
that showed me that they didn't understand it, number one, but number two, where's the confidence when they're with the too highs who know everything?
And there's in such a small group, you would want them to feel comfortable to
Mhm.
speak out, and you can tell that they really must not understand the concepts at
Mhm.
all if they're not even comfortable speaking or sharing in a setting of like 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm blanking. Now, do you think that's like differentiating instruction to a T? That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Especially that individualized portion, like where it's like this group needs this group needs this one needs this. Do you think that could be something you work into, just doing more stations in general, doing those like rotations each week,
Yeah.
maybe working that in more would help with that too, so you're getting that
Yeah, and it's not
structure.
just the 2 days before the test. Yeah. Even if we're doing whole group instruction, I can pull 4 or 5 kids every day that week
and just
and work
working in
with
that
them
time.
on one concept that they might be struggling with. And then the next day I'm pulling a different group of kids and they get to do what the whole group is doing the day before. It doesn't even necessarily have to be stations.
It just needs to be
Intentional
plan, like planning that time into your day,
Mhm.
which is so hard. That's definitely something to bring to your PLC and to work into, and that goes with that whole pacing thing that we were
Mhm.
talking about too, is using that time to work on that. Okay, so I wanted to talk real quick about the setting of your classroom.
Mhm.
So like we were talking about earlier, you have great relationships with your students. Most of them feel very comfortable speaking out,
Mhm.
but I noticed that there are a few kids who never said anything, just kind of zoned out. What do you notice about that? Do you focus on them, and how can you?
I notice it, and so what I'll do to try to counteract it is I want to hear from someone I haven't heard from today. And then I'm big on not calling on students because I get it. I was in school once, and when you get called on, you don't necessarily know the answer. It's just like a gotcha from the teacher.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to hear your thoughts. So I do just call on kids sometimes.
And you need to know where they are.
Yeah, what they're thinking. And I always tell them it's okay if you're wrong because I'm wrong all the time. I mean, a couple weeks ago in my 5th period, a student raised their hand and said, "You're teaching us this concept wrong." And I taught it wrong all day long. And so it's
like a
good to
learning
let
moment.
them see me fail so that way they know if they raise their hand and they don't have the correct answer, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're all learning together. I think the disengagement comes from the students that I'm noticing in the particular class you observed. There's about 4 of them that never speak up. They're very disengaged in independent work, and they're very popular socially. So socially they've got it going on. Academically they don't. And so I think their head's just not in my classroom. They're thinking about what am I doing this weekend? Who am I going to see in the hallway? And as a first year teacher, I shouldn't say I'm not worried about those students. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to reach most of my students, and then figuring out how to get them engaged is on the back burner right now. So I do need help with that.
Do you feel like those kids that you're speaking on directly who are not engaged in that particular class, like are they the student who you think will do well in class no matter what? Like, or are they failing? Are they not?
They're failing.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were saying like they're doing well, they're just not engaged. I know that, so a particular strategy that could work, if you're, so like a warm-up y'all are doing, or you're doing like an independent practice or partner work, and you're going to go over something, be like, okay, in about 3 minutes we're going to go over this, like coming up to them discreetly saying like, hey, so-and-so, will you do number 1? Or I'm going to call on you for number 1. Okay, another student over here who, okay, I'm going to call on you for number 2. I'm going to call on you for number 3. And that encourages them. Like, first, they're going to have to do it in order for you to call on them. But you've given them that warning that you're going to do that.
And even if they don't do all 5 of them, they do at least number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I've noticed they love to write on the board. So if I say you're going to do number 1 on the board, they practice. They write it out on their paper to practice their handwriting. So,
okay, so those are strategies that are working to get them involved in like that warm-up time, which it is crucial. Like it's getting them in that mindset, and it goes over key things that you've been learning. Okay, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to. And then you utilize your space really well for the most part. I noticed the first time I came in, your desk was a different way. Mm-hmm. And then when I've come in another time, you rearranged it so that you have like easier access to your computer, to the board, to the students, and it's like more open. Mm-hmm. So I think that will definitely benefit them, and not being behind your desk, if that makes sense. Like
I had no space to myself. I think it was making me chaotic.
Yeah.
In class in front of students, it was making me feel unorganized, and so that has definitely helped.
That's helped. Okay. Yeah. And I also talked about utilizing the whole classroom. So another way to make sure that students are engaged when you're going over something is, or just utilizing that space when y'all are taking notes. So walking around, checking with them, talking to them, pointing things out on their paper that they're doing well, utilizing that whole classroom space so that there's that accountability of like Miss Bart can see what I'm doing, like she's in here and she notices. But other than that, the setting of your classroom, despite the not having a fourth wall in this open classroom concept, you really do fill the space up well. And then just the final thing I wanted to talk about and look at today quickly was your goal. So we talked and we set a goal to engage students in 45 minutes a week of iReady reading instructional lessons. And this is a county policy. Students will pass 3 lessons a week in iReady. What have you noticed? And our outcome is we wanted students' lexile, phonics, and vocabulary skills to meet grade level expectations. We wanted them to get to that that expectation of that we'd set for them. And like iReady is an intervention program.
Right.
What have you noted? Have you put in any interventions and incentives, and has that data changed at all?
What I'll do is I will congratulate the students who have any time on iReady by Tuesday in class verbally. Congratulations, Jolie, you have 10 minutes on iReady. Thank you for doing what you need to do this week. And then I'll get back on, and I'll do that every day through Friday.
Do you do that in all your classes or just your homeroom?
All classes.
All classes, okay.
But I was absent last week. As you know, I had the flu. Kind of dropped the ball on iReady. Just got on this morning because I was playing catch up. And
Nobody.
About 75% of my students have 0 minutes on iReady. So, something's got to give. I'm going to have, but I did have students asking me yesterday in my third period, which third period is a higher performing class, when are you going to start assigning us lessons on iReady? So they want me to assign them lessons, but I think they don't understand that even if I do assign them lessons, it's still going to be on the level in which they scored on. Because some of them scored a 4th grade level, they probably shouldn't have. They probably rushed through their test.
Yeah.
But I still can't assign you 6th grade lessons until you test into the 6th grade.
And they also don't understand necessarily that, yes, maybe it is on the 2nd or 3rd grade level, but that's because you need that, and that's okay. It's filling in those gaps. And so we looked at your data. We recognized that they're still not achieving that. What are some other like incentives that you could do that you've maybe thought of? And then I'll share some of my thoughts.
So I know a lot of teachers, ELA teachers in this school do treasure chests every Friday if students reach their goals. So I could make like a treasure chest that students who have gotten 45 minutes of iReady a week, they can get a piece of candy or an eraser or a pencil out of the treasure chest every Friday and do it in front of the other students so they're motivated.
That's a good idea.
I could offer pride points.
That's a really good way to get that, because you're aligning, because that is an expectation. That's a school expectation that that's part of Pride, and that's iReady is also a school expectation. So that's kind of aligning those two programs together. Do you have like a free seating area, like bean bags or like a comfy chair or anything like that?
Pillows and one comfy chair, and it is on Donors Choose right now, flexible seating. I'm waiting for someone to pick it up. I just don't have any money. As you know, teachers don't make any money. So I'm waiting for someone to pick it up and donate.
Okay.
But if I don't get it this year, it's not the end of the world. I'll wait till next year and I can get a mini grant, or my mom will help me out at the beginning of the school year, I'm sure. It's just...
Because I was going to say, having, at least with... it wouldn't work with all your classes. Later. It wouldn't work necessarily with all of your classes, but with that homeroom period during DEAR time, during that drop everything and read time, the 5 people who have the most time getting a plate, like they get to go sit in that free seating area, or they can like choose where they want to sit, or even you could do that in every class. Like, do you have assigned seats in your classes?
I do.
So the top 3 people in each class get to pick on Friday where they want to sit.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would work, because they always want to sit there.
They always want to sit in the comfy stuff. They always want to sit by their friends. They always want to pick where they sit. So allowing that independence and that choice, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So we're going to set to set in some sort of incentive, whether it's a treasure chest, whether it's free seating, whether it's
a choice of all of the above.
A choice of all of the above, yeah. So that's what we want to work on, is doing that incentive and seeing how that affects the data, and how much we're seeing them involved in it. Other than that, do you have any questions? What do you want
I don't
to work on?
It's really just the differentiation and assessment uses that I struggle with the most, and the relationships crossing the line. Like I mean, you saw me. I don't know if I am or not, and I don't want to get in trouble.
You're not. It's
and I get inside my own head a lot, especially as a first year teacher, because this is my first time doing this on my own. So,
well, you're doing a great job, and that's what we're gonna work on, is getting that to that next step and helping you to feel comfortable and not feel anxious about developing like as a teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.